Morning and welcome to the Global Malaysia Series. I'm glad to see you all here very early in the morning. And this Global Malaysia Series is brought to you by the Economic Transformation Program, or the ETP. And the topic for our discussion this morning is retail beyond Malaysian shores. I'm Noelle, and I'll be the moderator for the panel this morning. The retail and wholesale sector is a very key area in the country. It is the fourth biggest contributor to the government's key economic areas that they have identified, which Pemandu has identified. And it contributed 114 billion ringgit to the GNI in 2011, up from about 100 billion ringgit in 2010. So these are very robust numbers, and obviously driven by domestic consumption. Now the question is, we have a very vibrant retail sector, but the bigger question is, how many international Malaysian brands do we have out there? So I think this is the question we hope to address in the panel. How can we push out more Malaysian brands overseas? And why is that important? I suppose from one is from trade perspective, and it's also about just getting the Malaysian name out there. And this morning we have Chen Tien Yue, the Executive Director of Royal Selangor. He is the fourth generation family member to run this business. And there's something I have to say about Royal Selangor. It was founded in 1885 by Tian Yue's great-grandfather. And it's probably the oldest retail brand in Malaysia. Would that be correct? Yeah. And it's also and it's the only brand, as far as I know, has the royal status. So I think that's really a remarkable story. So then the challenge, I guess, for Pemandu and BFM at the time when Pemandu conceived this idea of Global Malaysia Series, who could we match up to someone like Royal Selangor? So a few names were considered. And then Tian Yue chimed in and said, how about British India? And so we have the lovely Rhoda. She's the CEO of British India. And Rhoda came back from US to Malaysia in 2011. She spent quite a number of years there. She was a consultant with McKinsey & Co. Incidentally, Tian Yue was also with McKinsey in, I think, the Kuala Lumpur office. So we are quite happy, we are very happy to have Rhoda here today. She's the niece of the founder, Pat Liu, British India. So we hope to have quite a fruitful discussion about how to push Malaysian brands out there. And after that, we want to invite Mr. Ravindran Devagunam. He's the director of the Retail and Wholesale NKEA in Pemandu. So we hope he can give us a bigger picture about what to expect, what can the government do, what the government should do, or maybe not do. So, we hope to get some perspective from him. And after that, we'll end off with a Q&A session. So some of you may have some questions that you may like to pose to Tian Yue or Rhoda about how to bring your brand forward. So thank you for joining us today. The first question I want to start off with is, let's take a look at the local market right now, because this is really your primary market. And the retail scene has developed so tremendously. It's really maturing very quickly in Malaysia. And one of the things is that a lot of Western brands have come in, a lot of Western luxury brands and mass luxury brands, if that's such a term. I think they're called prestige brands. So how are you positioning yourself in relation to these brands? Maybe Tian Yue, you can start.
Yeah, I think we feel brand positioning is very important, and we are quite lucky. Like Noelle said, the brand started, or the company started 128 years ago, and I think it's quite rare to have an Asian brand with a long heritage in craftsmanship. My great-grandfather was making things in pewter. Today, 128 years later, we're making things in pewter. So there's a long history. And that's a great foundation as a starting point. So as part of the whole brand positioning, I think that's one key advantage we have. Beyond that, it's then differentiating yourself. And I think we feel that we own this category. If you were to go into any market around the world where we felt that we prioritize it as a market, we will want to own pewter as a category in that market.
So the category is pewter?
Well, the category broader than that is giftware, I think. And we operate in multiple categories, whether it's wine accessories or home decor. But generally, if you want to have a strong identification with something, it's easy to have it with pewter because we've got that credible, authentic story. Now, of course, then this doesn't count for anything if nobody wants anything in pewter. So why own a category that...
And silver will be your major competitor, wouldn't it?
And other metals or ceramic or crystal, so there's a lot of competition. So ultimately, we have to make sure that the category that we own is still relevant And that's where the design innovation comes in. We need to make sure that with this authentic 128-year-old history, we are innovating from a design point of view today to make this material and the product categories that we create relevant to today's consumer. So I think from a brand positioning, very clear that we have a point of differentiation. We're working with an unusual material, we own it, we have a long heritage of craftsmanship in it, and we are doing the design innovation today to make that a relevant offering to consumers. So for us, we feel that the brand positioning is very unique, and therefore it's something that we can focus on, and that gives us a strong competitive edge.
Rhoda, British India, if I have to draw a comparison, one brand name, one Western brand name that comes to mind would be Ralph Lauren. It's really about a lifestyle concept that you're trying to promote. Is that a fair assessment?
We are definitely a lifestyle brand, and I think like in relation to how we position ourselves in a crowded marketplace out there is our ability to define, say, we have a good story. It's a compelling story. It is one that marries the best of the East and the West, and with the current Asian transformation, I think this becomes more and more relevant in terms of the story. Additionally, like if you think about how many tropical countries are there out there in the world, take a guess. I think it's like around 160, 170. And you think about how many premium tropical brands producing apparel for our climate, right? That is of high quality, easy to wear, elegant yet comfortable. So that's how we position ourselves in terms of the competitive market. And at the end of the day, if we are true to our story and we are true to what we want to deliver to our customers, we compete effectively.
But what about pricing? How does it come into play in your competitive strategy?
In terms of pricing, if you want high quality products, you do have to invest in terms of like where we get our things manufactured. India and China are not low-cost production countries. Like, for example, the fabric, like what I'm wearing right now is an Irish linen piece. The fabric comes from Europe, right? These are best-in-class linen pieces. If you were to purchase them in any other international brands, you'll be paying like comparative prices for those as well.
So despite what it seems to me, you have quite a clear positioning. In the case of Royal Selangor, there's history, and then British India is about lifestyle and very wearable wear, yet quite classy. Then what happened in a situation where in KLCC, of course, that's like the top shopping mall right in Malaysia, and what I understand from news reports, British India was asked to move, and Royal Selangor was asked to scale down or to relocate to a higher floor where there's lower traffic. So despite all these strengths that you have, what happened in KLCC and in the situation there?
Well, I have had a conversation in length with Pat Liu, the founder of British India, and it was it happened a few years ago. So if you think about back to when British India and KLCC started, it was back in 97, 98.
Were the first retailer
Yes.
that's the first retailer in that spot.
At that point in time, it was the financial crisis. The international retailers pulled out, but only the Malaysian retailers came in, right? Tian Yue, I think Tian Yue yourself as
And
well.
you're keeping quiet.
That's my chance.
And so despite being cash-strapped, as Malaysians, we like Pat Lee was saying, like, I'm going to borrow and steal. I'm going to make this happen. I have to be there. Her vision was more or less aligned to the vision of the late Tun Azizan to build this iconic landmark to showcase Malaysian brands. So then that happened. And then fast forward 10 years down the road, we are asked to move from our international floor to go up to third floor saying, hey, by the way, maybe you should be with the handicraft, and by the way, don't sell clothes, sell furniture. So it was out of blue.
What triggered that kind of conversation and that thinking on the part of KLCC?
It was actually mind-boggling because we were performing and are still performing, and yet somehow or rather, they were thinking, oh, let's clump all the Malaysian brands together. I think it was just the fact that our country of origin was Malaysian, and they assume that it's a like thing and move it up. If that had happened, it would have been multiple steps back in terms of brand positioning. It's a de-branding exercise if that were to happen.
And I suppose landlords do know best what works for their mall. And on that floor, what they wanted to put the likes of the Gucci's of the world on that floor, that first floor. So there must be something in KLCC's mind that they didn't think that you would fit that branding.
I don't think it was, because that floor is an international floor. So if you look in terms of the product offering, the price points, they are more or less comparable, right? And in terms of international brands, there's always going to be plenty to fill the floor. Then the question to think about, when you want to build an international showcase for Malaysian brands, what do you want to put there? How do you want to portray us Malaysian brands to the world? So that's something for them to consider.
I think where you are located in a mall is a key branding statement or element. You can spend a lot of time on A&P and other marketing activities, but you just have to be in the right locations with the right neighbors. And a move 2 floors up is certainly a few steps backwards in terms of positioning the brand. I think we are missing a few opportunities here. You're right, a mall may choose to have its own mix. They want to make their own decisions on where they feel the brands should be. But there are certain malls, such as Suria KLCC, which I think play a more important role than your typical mall. This is the mall at the base of the Twin Towers, which appears in every ad you might see about Malaysia. The entire tourism population coming to this country will have as a first stop Suria KLCC. And when you get to this mall, why have a cookie cutter mall that you will find in Singapore or Jakarta or Hong Kong or Shanghai? What does that do for that international traveler's experience if he comes here and sees the exact same things? I think the first assumption is Malaysia doesn't have anything different to offer. If I can't see any good Malaysian brands in here unless I climb to the top floor, then I must reach the conclusion that Malaysian brands aren't there yet. And I think if this is the case, if Malaysian brands aren't there yet, then what to do? We don't force the situation. We don't take brands who are not there yet and force them next to other brands that help raise their brand positioning. I don't think we need to go to that level. We're not asking for that sort of affirmative action. But if there are certain brands, I think we're missing an opportunity, because you have a chance to showcase the best of Malaysia, and the prime spots in the best malls are that opportunity.
From what I gather, with British India, I think they took KLCC to court, and then the matter was settled, and you stay where you are now. And in the case of Royal Selangor, what I understand, there was a lot intense lobbying on your part, or at least on your uncle's part, to stay in where you are. But what happens for the smaller retailer, the smaller brand player who may not have the kind of clout, the kind of lobbying power like both your brands? So what would your advice be then?
I think in our case, lobbying sounds like such a negative thing to say.
But it was essentially that, right?
I think we were trying to make that exact same case that I just said. The point that we're trying to make is that if you have Malaysian brands at this level, then consider the case that we have an opportunity to highlight these brands. And we had to make that case over and over again to as many ears as possible that would take the second to listen to that case. I agree, it's not easy to have that opportunity to make that case. If you don't have those relationships, you don't have that second conversation. And we were very close. We were very close to moving up. In the end, our 5,000 square foot flagship store shrank to about 2,200 square feet for 3 brands, which is really not quite enough for us to house our Royal Selangor, Selbrand, and Commons brands. So ultimately, it was a big compromise. But you're right, it's not easy to have that access to make that change. And I don't have an answer for you, because unfortunately, that's
What about looking at other malls then? Because in the end, what you have is a wonderful space in Pavilion, right at the door next to the main entrance.
So I think then you look for the next opportunity, and we were lucky that there was another mall that felt that it was a good spot for a Malaysian brand to be at the front of a mall, to take a double-story, 7,000 square foot flagship store. So it worked out in the end because
the timing of the negotiation around the same time when this KLCC situation is happening.
Yeah. So coincidentally,
Use
when
the
that
leverage.
opportunity came up, we were a bit more open to having a smaller store in KLCC. But at that point, we were fighting very hard because the idea of losing your flagship presence in a top Malaysian mall is it's a real blow. It's really the years of work that you put into it, and it gets taken away very, very quickly. So I think that was we were lucky in that situation.
One of the things, a common theme has been talent, finding the right talent, either to manage your stores, to design your products. It's a recurring theme we hear in every conversation, conferences. How are you managing this issue about talent?
At the end of the day, it's about being able to tell a compelling story to the people that you want to bring on board, firstly. Secondly, I think there is no easy answer. If you think about just because the size of our population is small, that is the root cause of not finding talent. The other thing is the perception of the retail industry as on the hierarchy of professions to choose from. It's on the lower tiers.
Because it's a hard business, or salaries don't justify the kind of time you have to put in?
So it's a combination of a couple of factors, right? Partly is because if you think of from the salary base, you say in the States, if you were to do like something like what they call a sin industry, like casino, you get paid maybe 20 to 30% more because of the stigma. And 30% is not a game changer. But their overhead bases are more or less the same across like their retail industries versus a casino. In Malaysia, for Malaysian brands, retail brands in particular, if I compare like BritishIndia to Petronas, it's not even a close comparison, right? So of course that salary base becomes an issue. However, then you have to start finding like, what about passion, right? And then that's where you want to try and find and attract people from that aspect. But again, no easy answer. It continues to be a challenge for us.
I think talent's a major issue. It's one of the biggest constraints of growth. If you want to go and open new markets, you want to have people that you can send out there and represent the brand. You want to know that you have guys who know the brand values and are going to execute well when they go and open a new market. So for us, talent's one of the biggest constraints of how quickly we can grow. What can you do about it? I think the first thing is we feel that it's a great opportunity for Malaysian talent to go outside. If you have a Malaysian brand that's going and opening new markets, you have fantastic opportunities to send Malaysians out there, whether it's on a permanent basis, on a part-time basis, to build a new market. And entrepreneurial Malaysians, I think, will be attracted to these opportunities. So if they like the idea of going and building something new, then I think whether the pay is not quite the size of a $1 billion company, I think we can offer something else different. But the stigma is there. There aren't enough people thinking about careers in retail, in careers in design, product design. I think Malaysia has a lot of graduates who've come out of fashion, graphics, interior, but product design is something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. And I think that's going to be an issue because our design team basically is fully Malaysian and fully groomed, I think, from their early days. There's no opportunity to get in senior hires who have deep product design expertise. So it's a bit of a long cultivating process, but that's the approach that we are taking. But I think fantastic opportunities, and as more Malaysian brands go out, people who are attracted to entrepreneurial opportunities like that, I think will see the trade-off between that and perhaps pay.
In the case of Rhoda, you came back from the US after spending some time there, JP Morgan, McKinsey, and now back in British India. So what made you, what was the compelling factor for you to come back? Was it just equity or, what was it?
I'm just an employee, by the way.
Your niece of the founders.
I still
Noelle is
call
all
her-
about money here.
You know what truly excited me about coming back? It is the brand. I grew up around it. I see how it grew. I looked at the kind of how many premium tropical brands are there out there, and I realized from that consultant banker mindset, it's like, yikes, this is a big opportunity. And coming back, having the opportunity to work with someone iconic, even though she's my aunt, Pat Liu, it's a tremendous opportunity. And secondly, and more importantly, excited at the opportunity to take the brand to the next level. So that is what brought me back.
So when you came back, you worked in McKinsey. Obviously, the variability in talent, it's not as wide as, say, when you come back here. This is a general observation anyway among Malaysian companies. The variability in talent is wider.
Then it's interesting when you have variability,
Yeah,
right?
how
That makes
do you-
life interesting.
Okay, yeah. So obviously, you must like the challenge. What do you have to do? What do you have to do to get British India up to mark? Not to say it's not below mark, but how do you bring it up to the next level?
I mean, Noelle, I think you pointed it out right. I am still, literally, this whole thing is still work in progress. Bringing up to markets, you have to think in terms of tiers, right? So I have to figure out what is the engine and heart of the company that I need that like heightened level of professionalisms in, and I just focus on that department by department. I can't go like one shot, so I go for the more critical ones first and be super hands-on on that. Unfortunately, that means sometimes I don't sleep as much as I should, but it is super exciting because the hunger to learn from the people that I work with there is there. The desire to grow, the desire to be better, the desire to be an international brand that we can be truly proud of beyond what we have right now is there. So now how do we work together, harness it, and move to the next level?
People tell me that Malaysians, because there will be the minority who are super hardworking and super out there, but in general, there's a bit of that comfort zone. Being the comfort zone, it's good enough. Malaysia gives you a good enough living. Until you go to Singapore, and then your currency is reduced so much. But the thing is, then I suppose was there any culture change that you had to put in place, or because the staff would have worked with Pat Liu and they would have been used to her style of working.
She is not a laid-back person, yeah.
Okay, so you're just a mini version of her.
But I get your point. I think at the end of the day, a lot to do is communication. Sometimes people do not understand the sense of urgency. So in retail, I tell them, like, just as hotel rooms are perishable, every day is perishable. Because if you miss one day, if you are late one day, it means that you lose that one day worth of opportunity to make the sale that you otherwise would have had. So it's all about communication and people understanding the urgency of making things happen.
And what about customer service? Royal Selangor, if when I go to some of the stores, I notice the people who attend to customers, they are more senior.
Polite way of saying things.
Yeah, senior. So, is that a deliberate strategy? Do they serve better than, say, the Gen Ys?
Oh, I think we have an interesting mix. If you walk into a typical Royal Selangor store now, you'll see someone who's been with us for, 15 years, 20 years, and then next to them maybe someone who's been with us 18 months, or 12 months. And I think that's an interesting mix. You're right, it's unusual in retail to have a slightly older customer service team. But I think in our case, we see a lot of value and experience that some of them have. A lot of our customers ask a lot of questions, a lot of information, and they seek advice. They want advice, perhaps not from a fashion point of view and how good it looks on you, but they want advice on on gifting. If they are a certain occasion or a certain VIP, they need something, they want to get good advice on what would make that good gift and how to personalize it and how to make it special. And I think we have some very experienced members of the team who are able to add value in that respect. We have a very wide product category. Product categories. Unfortunately, our business is slightly unusual in that if you come in as a salesperson, you need to know a bit about our wine accessories. You need to know a bit about our home decor items. You need to know a bit about our personal accessories like cufflinks, our belts. And the product category assortment is very wide. So the guys who come in at the start, it takes them a while to get up to speed. And so we see that value in having a combination of experienced guys in the team and the newer members. And of course, the newer members bring very important energy to it and keeps people on their toes. And I think that's a good combination.
Customer service is really about discipline. So how do you impose that discipline on your staff to make sure when every customer that they speak to, they're polite, even though if the customer is rude to them?
I think that all comes from training or kind of that reinforcement of messages from the store manager. We do quite a fair bit of role plays to kind of get them prepared for difficult
regular
situations.
trainings that you give your staff?
You see, there's a lot of downtime between like peak and when there are nobody around, because it's just like, hey, it's 11 in the morning, but the stores needs to be open. So we actually tell them, hey, you know, you can actually play some games, and one of these games are like role play, this type of like scenarios for them to just get used to it.